Mary Kennedy, our special guest for today, to say a few words to us, and that will wind up in case any of you are anxious to see what time to leave at. But Mary, you're very welcome, and I'll leave it over to you.
Thank you, Eugene, and thank you to Knocklyon Network for inviting me here this morning. And I know it's kind of late, so if anybody has to go, please feel free. Don't worry about having to walk out. But it's lovely to be here. We were chatting outside, and somebody was saying, you know, would this be a normal time to be starting off? And yes, it would. 7 o'clock in the morning would be, but it wouldn't have to have a face on and be dressed up. So that normally happens. And then somebody said, but you probably have a team to do that. No. It's all a solo thingy. The makeup is usually put on in the rearview mirror in the car. So networking is a really nice concept to be dealing with here this morning. I know from people in the parish that I'm involved with in other groups that the Knocklyon Network is a very vibrant enterprise, and it's something that I was thinking about. It's something that's very new to me, because when I was growing up, networking was the last thing anybody did. We actually were very secretive, purse people, and we didn't share, and we didn't get the support that's you can from kind of networking with people. I mean, Eugene asked me to speak about the path that I took to become a television presenter. And number one, I am the most unlikely television presenter that you would ever find, because I was painfully shy as a child, and I still am shy. And I do step outside my comfort zone all the time, but I just park it and I can control it and all of those things. But I was so shy that my mother sent me to, well, it's speech and drama now, it used to be elocution classes, and also to Irish dancing classes, just so you get out there. I couldn't ask for anything in a shop, I couldn't do anything like that. So, it just wasn't, there wasn't an outward looking and a sharing reality to community when I was growing up. Having said that, now both my parents were really involved in the community in Clondalkin. So to the extent that when I decided that I would like to answer this ad in the paper to become a continuity announcer, first of all I said to myself, absolutely not a chance. But I said, I am telling nobody about this, and I didn't. And I didn't even tell my parents. I really wasn't even sure where RTE was. But I went and I answered the ads, and it was a very slow process which went on over several pieces with interviews and camera tests and all the rest. And I suppose the elocution probably stood to me, but I used this thing which I have used so many, this I suppose strategy that I've used so many times over the 41 years, and I didn't know what it was called then. But I now know from being involved in therapy groups and everything that it's visualization. And I visualize myself standing in front of the cameras and, you know, presenting, and I wanted to do that. So I kind of just pushed forward. But again, I really feel that if I had had that feeling of being part of a community and being involved, it would have helped. I also feel that there's something else I had which stood me to good stead while I was starting off in RTE, and that was the fact that I was doing it part-time, but that I was actually a teacher by trade. And the reason I applied in the first place was that because all through college when I was studying to be a teacher, I worked part-time, so I said, well, and with respect to Sheila and other teachers in the audience, and I was a teacher myself, I said, what am I going to do for the rest of the day when I start teaching? So I said, I'm going to have something to do part-time or I'll go off my head. So that's why I applied to be a part-time continuity announcer. Now I know, I also have a daughter who's a teacher, that they work very hard, and I work very hard as a teacher, but I did used to bring in my copies into RT, and I'd be correcting them when the programmes were on in between the announcements. But I had this attitude, I think, from the word go, that, look, if they give me a contract next year, that's great, I'd love it. But I always had the teaching in my back pocket, and I think that's something that I always say to pupils and students when I'm talking to them. It's very nice to have something that you can fall back on, as they used to say. And that, I suppose, was probably the equivalent of the Knocklyon network nowadays, because I had something that kind of was my support and my aid to having that attitude of, well, if it works, fine, and if it doesn't, I have somewhere else to go for money, but also for support. And that is the value of people sharing and helping and networking with each other. I feel it's very, very valuable and very, very important. And I think that's why, you know, I never went looking for anything right through my career. It came to a point where it was getting difficult. I had 4 children, and also there were more opportunities coming along. But I think the mindset was there of, I can always leave this to one side, and then I just kept getting the contracts. And then the Eurovision came along. Now that's the other thing that I also speak about when I'm talking in schools, because people say, oh gosh, you know, it's lovely to do the Eurovision and something, weren't you really lucky? I mean, I got to present the Eurovision, which was an absolute highlight of my career in 1995, but it was my 3rd attempt. It was I auditioned for it twice and didn't get it. So there was the kind of the disappointment and the putting yourself out there, and again this kind of secretive thing that I had about not wanting, well, I suppose it was a fear of rejection, and I did have to suffer the rejection twice. But again, I fell back on the visualization, and I had visualized myself, well, being involved in the Eurovision, and there's no way I would have been singing in the Eurovision, and if you hear me at 4 o'clock in the morning, you would know that. So I had really got this dream of the Eurovision since I saw Dana winning in 1970. I just said, oh my God, that is fabulous. So I applied. I was rejected. I applied, I was rejected, and then the 3rd time I kept doing this visualization. This is going to happen, this is going to happen. And I don't know whether in 1995, because it was the 3rd year in a row that it was coming from Ireland, that I don't know whether they felt sorry for me, said, Jesus, we better give it to her this year, or she'd be knocking on our door forever. But it was wonderful, and it did open so many doors, and as a result now I work full-time in RTE, and it has been an amazing journey. It has given me access to a huge variety of experiences from well, it introduced me to the developing world, because I was asked 2 years after the Eurovision to do the commentary for the funeral of Mother Teresa in Calcutta, and that was my first time. It was a life-changing experience to be landed in Calcutta, to see the abject poverty, and to see also the devout nature of all the religions and the way they were mourning this this tiny woman. And like, it was a culture shock, because the stench, the fact that at that time there were 18 million people living in Calcutta, and 5 million of them, which is just kind of more or less the population of Ireland, were living on the streets, and you literally couldn't go from here to the door without stepping over people. To see people, you know, foaming up the water, putting soap into the water in the gutters that was poured down early in the morning to kind of clean the gutters, and then they were putting their soap and their washing up liquid into it. They were washing their cooking utensils, they were washing themselves, men standing up, washing themselves in the gutter and washing their teeth in the gutter, and then heading off to work. That was absolutely life-changing for me, and I really do have an amazing, I suppose, connection with the developing world, and I've travelled many, many times to Africa and Sri Lanka and India, and it really gives me a purpose. Also, there was we travelled a few times with the Defence Forces to do maybe Christmas programmes or St. Patrick's Day programmes, and the first time I travelled with the Defence Forces, I got this huge insight into something that I think we ourselves take for granted, and that is our sense of community. It really is remarkable the way Irish, I think it's part of our DNA, that we just have a concern for people. It's, you know, it's the Seanachas or Scáchéile or Nadina. It really applies to Irish people. We were in Liberia, and Liberia was a hellhole. It was absolutely awful. And we were with the Defence Forces in their camp, which was, they were based in the old Hotel Africa, where Charles Taylor used to bring all his fancy visitors, and it was a beautiful resort at one point, and I was in bits. And they shared this camp with the Swedish contingent of the UN Defence Forces. We had a generator. There was nothing you could do outside of the camp after dark because there was no electricity in Monrovia, there was no transport, there was nothing. It was absolutely awful, and they did have their challenges. But obviously, because they are Defence Forces, they have to have their time off. And we went off with our running order of what we were going to film. We were going to do their carol service, we were going to, you know, have pieces from their families at home and all that sort of stuff. But when we got there, just in conversation with them, said, well, what do you do on your downtime? And it was obvious what the Swedish people did. There were men and women, mostly men in the Swedish forces, and you weren't allowed outside. It was a dry camp, so there was a gym, and every time you went by this gym, you'd see loads and loads of these, you know, gorgeous Swedish men working out, and you would also see them watching videos. They played cards, they played Jenga, they played Scrabble, all of those things. That was the way they used their time in a, you know, in a sociable way. And I said to the Irish guys, and do you do the same? They said, well, we do, but also during their working hours, they had gone out and they had discovered other needs. And what they did was they had adopted 2 charities, just because. And one of them was an orphanage which was being run by 2 orphans themselves, young men in their 20s who had been orphaned during the war. And they had taken in all of these waifs and strays. But the Irish Defence Forces, on one of their visits there, discovered that the boys' dormitory, that the gable end wall actually wasn't a gable end wall at all, it was a termite hill. And so the poor children were being bitten and scratched and itchy the whole time. So the Irish Defence Forces said, okay, this is going to be our project. And they built a new dormitory. That was part of their job. They built a new dormitory in their spare time for the orphanage for these guys. And then the other one was a Mother Teresa. It was a mother, I don't know what her order is called, but anyway, it was the Mother Teresa nuns, and they were running a hospice for the dying in Monrovia. Now that was awful, 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 awful. There was on the first top floor there was a men's ward, and in the middle there was a women's ward, and then on the ground floor there were the children of those people who had to be minded and looked after. The men, the first thing that would hit you was the stench of death and dying when you got in there. There were people queuing up outside, A, trying to get in, or B, trying to get in to feed their families or to look after them. And again, the Irish Defence Forces said, okay, this is going to be one of our projects as well. And on their time off, they would go to this place, they would talk to the men, they would wash them, they would bring sweets. I remember one guy coming in with opal fruits and sitting beside a man who was within days of dying. And you know, even the colour of the packet was something unusual for this man. The women soldiers did the same with the women, and they also were feeding and playing with the children downstairs. And that they organised a roster for themselves for their time off of doing this. And it just struck me. I went back to the director and I said, look, we're going to have to include this in our programme. And we did. And as a result, and again, it's an illustration of the sense of community that we have, they were able to fundraise back home to get money to support the 2 charities that they were working with in Monrovia. I just felt, and with respect to the Swedish forces in their downtime, they chose to do that. But not one of them, having chatted with our guys and women in their downtime, said, well, sure, look, I'm free at the same time as you, I'll go along and do it. It just didn't register with them, but it brought it home so strongly to me, the sense of community that we have as Irish people. And I think we don't really give ourselves enough credit for it. We just take it for granted, which is good, but I think we really should acknowledge that we are very good at that. That was a real highlight for me working. And I suppose then the work that I do now with Nationwide is a further illustration of that, because I am blown away every time I go down the country and you see, particularly during the recession, because I joined Nationwide in 2004 and I went right through the recession and now it's coming on the upturn again. But I can tell you, not every part of our country is enjoying, you know, the fresh shoots and the regrowth. It's very, very slow and not happening in certain parts. But you get small groups which are, you know, just taking on board the needs of their own community and the reaching out that's very much a part of us, and it's definitely happening. We love to showcase it on Nationwide. We love to, when we get, which we do, go to a community and say, oh yeah, well, we saw something on Nationwide and we said, well, why can't we do that? And that really, I think, has happened in particular with the whole men's sheds movement, because I can remember about 4 years ago going down to Dungarvan and talking to these men, and they had started a men's shed, and there weren't many in the country now, but now it's a burgeoning group. It's really, really enormously powerful, enormously important, and enormously successful. And obviously likewise with the women's groups, but I suppose we're just, men were probably like me, a little bit less inclined to reach out, and the men's shed movement is such a wonderful asset to a community. So those are the things that strike me about the way we live our lives. I think networking is hugely important. I am a very late, if you like, arrival to networking. I just avoided it for so many years because I don't know, I just felt, oh, people will only think I'm doing this so that I can gain something out of it. I think it's wonderful for sharing. I love the fact that businesses are supported and just given a leg up and an opportunity to present. And also then, you know, to make us realise that the services are there for us to avail of. Also to be conscious of what's in our community and to support it. It's like going back to the time when there was only the local shop. I can remember growing up, as I said, my parents were really deeply involved in the community. There was the ICA, the plan giving, the Winton Atira, all of those things. But also, I suppose there was no choice but to go to the butcher and the grocer and all of those things. Now we do have choice, but it's so important to support the local communities, and we say it as often as we can on Nationwide. Shop local, buy local. If you want to buy a gift, go to the local craftsperson, services, all of those things. So that's all I have to say. I'm really conscious of the time. I hope I haven't kept you too long, but I do applaud the work of the Knocklyon network and all of the community groups and the volunteers. It's just, we have a culture of volunteerism in this country, and I know that the culture of volunteerism is really, really strong in Knocklyon. So, míle buíochas, as an gura chuirt domsa teachtan sa maidin, agus go nairi go geal le na hain grúpa agus leis an network as Sean Mark.